Hey guys, so I want to talk to you about selecting a gravel bike and some things you might consider to select the right type of gravel bike for you, for where you're going to ride and what you're mostly going to do on that gravel bike, whether it's going to be off-road and steep trails, whether it's going to be long rides with pavement, mostly pavement and flat sections. So what would you think that you would be doing with your gravel bike? Now, my first gravel bike was more of a replacement or a substitute for a road bike, and this is actually my second gravel bike. But let me show you what I did when I chose to purchase this bike. Now, it's custom, so it's a little bit different than what you would get off the shelf, if you will. But I chose this bike first off, and I talked about this in my past videos. I knew I wanted to make a 2x. I felt a 2x was more important to have that additional gear range and being able to go from a pacing gear of real fast pace, maybe like 20-25 miles an hour pacing on flats, to a really small gear when I'm climbing up steep trails. That's what I was thinking about when I put this bike together, and this idea of this bike came together. I also have just a regular road cassette. That's an Ultegra cassette. Originally, this bike came with Ultegra RX, which was Shimano's first gravel group set, and that turned into the GRX. So this is actually the group that I took off my original Twin 6 frame that I had built up. That frame didn't fit me right. It was too big for me, and it was really more of a road frame than anything. And so I sold it only after owning it like 6 or 9 months. And then I kept the parts. So a couple things I decided to do when I had this custom built. I told Seven I really wanted to have plenty of clearance for bigger tires. And as you can see, this has some small tires on there now, but it's got plenty of clearance. I usually have 700 by 40s in there, sometimes 700 by 45s, and I have no issues. And I could probably put a fender on there too. I haven't tried it, but I'm sure I could put a fender and 700 by 40 tires easily, depending on the tires. The other thing I wanted to have on this frame that was more of a road type feel was a longer top tube. And so that longer top tube is kind of in lines with road and staying aero. If you look at my seat to my handlebars, it's a little more on the aero side. Gravel bikes end up being a little bit more upright, especially more of the modern gravel bikes. So this is the wheel set, the second wheel set that I got for it. That obviously bigger tires, they fit in there fine, and they fit in there really nicely. These tires also could be changed with a different gear changing. So what I considered when I'm going to go real small is I have that 44-26, and then I have that bigger cassette 11 by 44. I can't put that big cassette on there now because it just won't reverse mold it, if you will. I could never get the B screw set properly to make it shift nice. So I have to take off the chain rings and switch everything in order to do that. And unfortunately with White Industries, I have to take off the cranks to switch the chain rings. So with this bike, it was really geared towards doing long distance. So I could do the super long distance and have the bigger 48 tooth up front and be able to go do my Century rides with the slick tires. And sometimes I use bigger tires and non-slick tires, but it makes for a nice long distance ride with those tires. Now fast forward several years later, and I thought, well, this bike, when I ride on the trails, it's not really the best for the trails as far as the geometry. I have a little bit of toe over, if you can see where the the pedals are, because I'm a short guy, but I have big feet. So this is a smaller frame, and I think that the seat tube length is only 480, so it would be a 48 road frame, and so that makes it for tow over if you don't change things up a little bit. The other way alternative would have been to use 650B wheels. If I did 650 wheels, then that would give me obviously clearance because of the smaller wheels. And also the newer forks have a fore and aft, like my newer fork on my new bike. So I thought, well, if I'm going to build up another gravel bike, I'm going to make this other gravel bike more geared towards road. I mean, towards gravel, less geared towards road. This would be in the all-road gravel category. This would be in the more mountain gravel category. So what I did with this one is, again, with the additional clearance, but I think the stays are almost about the same, but they just look like they're wider. But they do have a drop stay. This was something they were doing with this newer year model, and I made them rake it out a little bit more. So not only does the fork able to go out further ahead, it has more trail, but the angle, the head tube angle, allowed it to have a little more clearance so I don't get tow over. And it comes pretty close, but I don't get tow over on that one. And these are some pretty big tires. These are the great Kenda Illuvium tires. I really love these tires. They're basically Panaracer Gravel King on steroids. They balloon out much more. They're more high volume. Kenda makes super high volume tires, so if you like more high volume tires, then you should check out Kenda. Anyway, so this got built up as a one by, thinking I'm just going to be focusing on the trails. If I do feel like I'm going to do mostly road, I switch this out to a 44. I have a 44 ring. Now this is easier switched out because it's on the Spider, and so I could just switch out the ring without taking off the cranks and switch it out to a 44. But this has the 38 on there, more geared towards the smaller, and this is an 1146. Now I don't like the bigger 1150 cassettes. I've always stuck with the 46. I don't like the way the real huge pie plate cassettes look on there, and I also feel that it's just not really good for the chain. It just feels weird. So I've stuck with that, and you see, even when I'm spread out all the way to the lowest gear, the chain looks fine. It doesn't seem like I'm tweaking it out. If you do that with a big 50, it's a different story. So that's how I built my bikes up, and then here's some of the parts that I wanted to show you. And you think about what you want to do when you build up your gravel bike, and think about where you're going to ride, and don't make the mistakes I did with that first Twin 6, getting a bike that was essentially a road bike frame with a little more clearance. Choose a bike. If you can, go test ride one. Even if you can't test ride that exact frame, that brand, maybe you're going to buy it online, you're going to buy it from a website or used or something like that. Now's a great time to buy. But if you're going to buy something without testing it, I would at least go to a bike shop and test something in that size to give yourself an idea of how that feels, because there's a couple factors there, not only with how much your standover and if it fits you right when you're pedaling, but also where your position is on your handlebars. You do have a little bit of flexibility with changing the feel with the stem and the width of your handlebar, and I tend to go shorter on my stems and longer on the top tube. So this is an 80 and this one is a 70. So I do like to have the shorter stems, but that's just how I set mine up. Some people like the longer stems and like to be stretched out a little bit more. Anyway, that's just what I wanted to update you guys on. and then I'll be making some videos as I go for a ride. Finally getting some nice weather, but it's supposed to rain again. Talk to you guys later.